The silence shattered with the wail of a siren. A police car screeched to a halt nearby, its door slamming as an officer stepped out. He was a burly man with a grey buzz cut, deep lines etched into his face, and eyes burning with cold disdain. His uniform was rumpled, but the badge on his chest gleamed as if deliberately polished. His movements carried a threat, like someone looking for a reason to unleash violence. He approached Michael, his heavy steps echoing in the empty park. "Name," he barked, his voice sharp as a whip. Michael calmly removed his cap, his gaze steady. "Michael Jordan. What's the issue, officer?" he replied, maintaining politeness but sensing the air thicken with tension. He knew scenes like this were not uncommon in Los Angeles. High-profile cases of police violence, from Rodney King to George Floyd, echoed in his mind, a reminder of the fraught reality. "ID," the officer snapped, stepping closer. His hand rested on his holster, his eyes blazing with something dark and deep-seated. Michael slowly reached for his wallet, but before he could produce his ID, the officer swung his leg and struck Michael in the stomach with brutal force. The blow, fueled by rage, was devastating. Michael staggered, the air knocked from his lungs, and he collapsed to his knees, hitting the asphalt. Pain seared through his body, but he clenched his teeth, refusing to show weakness. The officer leaned over him, a mocking smile twisting his lips. "Know your place," he hissed, his voice dripping with racial venom and the arrogance of assumed impunity. Without another word, he turned, let out a low, guttural laugh, and walked back to his car. The engine roared, and the vehicle disappeared around the corner, leaving Michael on the ground. Michael rose slowly, clutching his side. Every movement throbbed with pain, but his mind remained clear. He knew this wasn't just an assault, it was a challenge. The officer's racism was blatant, and Michael felt resolve ignite within him. His improvisational skills, honed through years of acting, and knowledge gleaned from conversations about legal nuances in contracts, began to form a plan. He wouldn't let this go unpunished. The law, if wielded correctly, could be a weapon. He recalled an attorney once explaining precedents where victims of police violence won justice through the courts. This would be his path. He scanned the empty court. The park's stillness now felt ominous, but something caught his eye. On the ground, near where the officer had stood, lay a small, shiny object. Michael approached, wincing as he held his side, and picked it up. It was a body camera, likely detached from the officer's uniform during the attack. His heart raced. If it recorded the incident, it could be key evidence. But as he turned it over, he noticed the lens was cracked, and the casing bore traces of blood. His blood. This wasn't just evidence, it hinted at something deeper. Why hadn't the officer noticed its loss? And why did the camera appear deliberately damaged before the attack? The assault in the park had been a turning point. Clutching the damaged body camera, Michael had enlisted an attorney he knew from contract negotiations. Together, they filed a lawsuit against the officer, identified only as John Doe, who had dodged appearances citing illness. The suit accused him of assault with racial bias and violation of civil rights. Michael knew this case wasn't just about him. It was part of a broader fight against police violence that had poisoned society for years. Cases like those of Rodney King and Breonna Taylor, which had dominated headlines, were on everyone's mind. The judge, an older woman with a stern face and piercing gaze, entered the courtroom. Her robe rustled as she took her seat. "The case of Michael B. Jordan versus Officer John Doe," she announced, and the room tensed. The officer, finally present, stood at the defense table. His burly frame and grey buzz cut marked him as the man from the park, but his face was pale, his eyes avoiding contact. His attorney, a man in an expensive suit, exuded confidence, as if certain the system would shield his client. Michael spoke first. His voice, low and clear, filled the room. "Your Honor, on May 14th, 2025, I was assaulted in Echo Park. The officer before you struck me in the stomach with such force that I fell to the ground." He said, "Know your place," words that clearly reveal racial motives. "I offered no resistance, broke no law. I was simply a citizen standing in a public park." Michael spoke calmly, but his words carried weight, as if delivered from a stage where every syllable mattered. His improvisational skills, sharpened by his acting career, held the room's attention. The officer's attorney rose to object. My client acted within his duties, responding to a report of suspicious behavior. The strike was accidental, prompted by a tense situation. But Michael was prepared. He submitted the damaged body camera as evidence. A technical expert hired by his team had recovered part of the recording. Though the video was blurry due to the cracked lens, the audio was clear. The officer's mocking laugh and the words "Know your place" rang out in the courtroom. The jurors, 12 people of varied ages and backgrounds, exchanged glances, their faces tightening. Michael also presented a medical report confirming his injuries, bruises on his stomach and a cracked rib. His attorney, Ellen Rivera, a seasoned lawyer passionate about civil rights cases, emphasized this assault was not an accident. It was an act of racial hatred enabled by abuse of power. We demand not only compensation, but a criminal investigation into the officer's actions. When the officer testified, he denied everything. I don't recall those words. The camera was damaged. It proves nothing, he said, but his voice wavered, his gaze darting. The judge frowned, clearly unimpressed. Michael noticed this. The officer's uncertainty was a weak point. But at the hearing's end, a twist emerged. The officer's attorney moved to dismiss the camera evidence, claiming it was lost and unreliable. When the judge asked how he knew it was lost, the officer paled. I meant it could have been lost, he stammered. Silence fell. Michael exchanged a look with Ellen, sensing the officer was hiding something bigger. Why was he so nervous about the camera? And why was his attorney so eager to discredit it? The judge called a recess, but the tension lingered. Michael stepped into the hallway, clenching his fists. He knew the truth was on his side, but that camera and the secret it held could be the key to the officer's conviction. Michael gripped the camera, a plan taking shape. He would go to court. This officer, his hatred and his crime would not go unpunished. But this camera, it held a secret that could change everything. The prior hearings had unraveled the truth the officer tried to conceal. The damaged body camera Michael found in the park became the pivotal evidence. A technical expert, hired by Michael's attorney, Ellen Rivera, recovered not only the audio but also part of the video, which, though blurry, clearly showed the moment of the attack. The officer's hateful words echoed in the courtroom, condemning him. But the breakthrough came when Ellen uncovered the officer's history. Identified as Sergeant Richard Klein, he had a record of prior complaints for excessive force that had been lost in the system. One, from a young African-American man 5 years earlier, described a similar attack, a kick and racist remarks. This evidence, presented in court, dismantled Klein's defense. Today, the room was quiet, but the tension was palpable. The jury, 12 individuals with serious expressions, had reached their verdict. Judge Grace unfolded the document and began to read. In the case of Michael B. Jordan versus Richard Klein, the jury finds the defendant guilty on all counts, including assault with racial bias, violation of civil rights, and abuse of power. She paused, her gaze fixed on Klein, who sat with his head bowed. His attorney, once smug, now looked rattled, nervously adjusting his tie. Michael clenched his fists under the table, but his face remained composed. He knew this moment was not just his victory, but a step toward change in a system that had long overlooked such crimes. Cases like George Floyd's killing or the shooting of Philando Castile still resonated in public memory, underscoring how hard justice was to achieve. Today, Michael felt his fight mattered. The judge continued. Given the severity of the crime, evidence of Mr. Klein's prior violations, and the clear racial motive, the court sentences him to 5 years in prison without the possibility of parole. She struck her gavel, the sound echoing sharply. Klein's head snapped up, his eyes flashing with anger, but he remained silent. 2 bailiffs approached, cuffing his wrists. His once imposing figure now seemed pitiful as they led him from the room. Ellen turned to Michael, her voice soft but trembling with emotion. "We did it." Michael nodded, feeling the tension in his chest give way to relief. He knew this case would ripple outward. The media was already abuzz, framing his fight as a symbol of resistance against systemic racism. But for Michael, it wasn't about fame. It was about truth, about ensuring no one else would hear "Know your place" from those meant to protect.